Imagine a typical workday in a small village in Egypt. The intense heat and dust were constant companions to the workers in the region. However, in 1945, a group of laborers made a discovery that would change their lives and the understanding of the spiritual world. In the middle of the desert, hidden for centuries, they unearthed a mysterious jar. Inside, there were treasures no one could have imagined, ancient manuscripts protected by leather that held long-lost secrets. These documents, later called the Nag Hammadi manuscripts, revealed 48 distinct works, many of which presented early Christian teachings deeply connected to Gnostic philosophy. Gnosticism is a school of thought that holds that hidden, profound spiritual knowledge is the path to salvation. These manuscripts offer a glimpse into this mystical journey, revealing secrets that had been concealed for centuries. The discovery of these texts was revolutionary. In a post-World War II world, where people were seeking to rebuild their lives and find answers to new questions, these manuscripts came as a light for many. They showed a version of Christianity very different from what most knew, with a Jesus less concerned with salvation through rules and rituals, and more interested in awakening the inner power of his followers. Among the texts, there were teachings that addressed ideas such as unity and manifestation, concepts that are now associated with the law of attraction. These principles, often mentioned by modern scholars like Greg Braden, suggest that Jesus taught that true transformative power didn't come from external sources, but from within each human being. The ancient manuscripts thus began to build a new narrative about individual power. For many scholars, these teachings raise an important question. Why were these texts hidden or forgotten for so long? The answer may lie in the fact that the early church had to make difficult choices about which teachings to preserve and which to set aside. The Nag Hammadi manuscripts, along with other similar texts, offer a vision that challenges the traditional structure of faith and religious power. However, the impact of this discovery goes beyond theology. It touches something deep within each of us. The idea that there are spiritual secrets guarded for ages makes us wonder what else might be lost to history. What more could be discovered? These texts are an invitation to explore not only the mysteries of the past, but also the mysteries of our own soul. The Gospel of Thomas is one of the most enigmatic texts found in the Nag Hammadi manuscripts. Unlike the canonical Gospels that make up the New Testament, this one does not tell the story of Jesus' life. Instead, it is a collection of sayings attributed to him, filled with deep and often mysterious messages. There are 114 brief teachings, but they are loaded with hidden meanings, meant for those who seek a more intimate spiritual truth and, above all, self-knowledge. At the very beginning of the text, we read that these are the secret words of Jesus, the living one, recorded by Judas Thomas, also known as Didymus, which means twin in Greek. This alone sparks the reader's curiosity, as the enigmatic tone suggests that Jesus was conveying something beyond what was taught to the general public. These words were not made for everyone, but for those ready for a deeper journey of spiritual discovery. Unlike the Gospels we know, which narrate miracles and historical events, the Gospel of Thomas challenges us to look within ourselves. Its sayings serve a practical function, to guide the reader toward a state of understanding and enlightenment, where the truth about human and divine nature becomes evident. This echoes the Gnostic tradition, which believes that salvation lies not in rituals or doctrines, but in true knowledge that frees the spirit. A clear example is saying 77, where Jesus states, "I am the light that is above all things. I am the all. The all came from me, and to me it has returned." This phrase reveals the belief in the unity of being with the divine. There is no separation between the Creator and creation, between Jesus and each of us. Everything is interconnected, and this is the key to understanding the Gospel of Thomas. Although excluded from the Bible, the Gospel of Thomas presents a new perspective on Jesus' teachings, focused on inner awakening and the realization of the divine potential within every human being. This vision contrasts with the idea of external salvation based on faith and penance, promoted by the canonical Gospels. And it is precisely this difference that makes the Gospel of Thomas so revolutionary and at the same time controversial. For those seeking answers beyond what has been institutionalized, the Gospel of Thomas presents itself as a spiritual guide that transcends the limits of traditional religion. It invites each of us to reflect on the true meaning of life and on our relationship with the divine, something that can be transformative but also unsettling for those not ready for this truth. Greg Braden, a renowned scholar of spirituality and science, has brought a new interpretation of Jesus' teachings, relating them to what we now call the law of attraction. This law, popularized in the 20th century, suggests that our thoughts and emotions have the power to attract events and circumstances into our lives. Braden argues that Jesus taught something similar, with a deeper focus on the power of inner consciousness and faith. In Jesus' teachings, especially those found in apocryphal texts like the Gospel of Thomas, the emphasis is on the power of belief and self-awareness. An example of this is when Jesus says, "The kingdom of God is inside of you and outside of you." Gospel of Thomas 3. This teaching suggests that there is no separation between the divine and the human. Everything we need to manifest the life we desire is already within us. Jesus did not teach blind faith in an external deity, but rather the recognition of the divine power that resides within every human being. He spoke of a process of inner transformation that, when understood, could literally move mountains. This concept is closely tied to what we now call manifestation, where thoughts and emotions, when aligned, have the power to shape reality. For many, the idea that Jesus taught the law of attraction may seem like a far-fetched interpretation of traditional faith. However, if we carefully examine the Gospels, we see that he often spoke about the power of faith, prayer, and feeling. When Jesus healed the sick, he said, "Your faith has healed you." The healing, then, did not come from an external force, but from the person's inner belief, their ability to connect with the divine within themselves. Greg Braden argues that this connection between emotion and thought is the key to unlocking manifestation. For him, Jesus taught that by uniting our mind and heart in a sincere and true desire, we can align our reality with what we want to manifest. Faith, then, is not just about believing, but about deeply feeling that what we desire is already a reality. By bringing forth this new interpretation, Braden invites us to revisit Jesus' teachings under a new light, recognizing the transformative power that each of us possesses. This leads us to reflect. Over the centuries, have we lost the true essence of Jesus' teachings? Perhaps by recovering this wisdom, we can rediscover the potential that exists within each of us. Gnosticism is a branch of early Christianity that flourished in the centuries following the death of Jesus. At the heart of this tradition is the belief that the material world is a prison, and the true purpose of life is to free oneself from this illusion through profound spiritual knowledge called gnosis. For Gnostics, salvation does not come through blind faith or sacraments, but through a mystical understanding of our true divine nature. According to this view, humanity is trapped in physical bodies, distanced from its true spiritual essence. Only through the discovery of this hidden knowledge, the knowledge of who we truly are, can we achieve liberation. In this perspective, Jesus is seen as the bearer of this revelation. He did not come solely to save humanity in the traditional sense, but to awaken people to the truth about themselves. This concept is clearly evidenced in the Gospel of Thomas, where Jesus says, "Whoever finds the meaning of these words will not taste death." Here, death symbolizes spiritual ignorance, the inability to recognize our connection to the divine. Knowledge, or gnosis, is what frees us from this state, allowing us to transcend the physical world and reach enlightenment. Unlike Orthodox Christianity, which sees salvation as something external, something that can only be achieved through Jesus as an intermediary, Gnosticism suggests that the individual has the power to find this salvation. Jesus' role, then, is more of a guide, someone who points the way for each person to discover their own inner truth. Gnostics also believe that the material world as we know it was created by a lesser deity, the demiurge, and that this world is imperfect and corrupted. The true divinity exists beyond the physical realm, in the spiritual kingdom. This view, often considered heretical by the early church, challenged the established power structure, leading to the marginalization of Gnostic teachings and their exclusion from the Bible. However, with the discovery of the Nag Hammadi manuscripts, much of this lost knowledge has been recovered. These texts invite us to reevaluate the role of spiritual knowledge in our lives and reflect on the possibility that true salvation is not found in dogmas or rituals, but in the inner search for answers about who we truly are. The Gospel of Thomas is one of the most intriguing and challenging texts found in the Gnostic manuscripts. Its interpretations are not simple and require deep reflection on the meaning of Jesus' words. Unlike traditional Gospels, this one does not narrate the life of Christ, but presents teachings that, at first glance, may seem enigmatic and even unsettling. A clear example of this is the famous saying, "Whoever seeks should not cease seeking until they find. When they find, they will be disturbed. When they are disturbed, they will marvel and will reign over the all." This message suggests that the spiritual search process is not comfortable. Finding the truth can indeed be disturbing, as it often challenges everything we have learned and believed. But it is precisely this disturbance that leads to greater understanding and ultimately to freedom. The process of marveling, as described in the Gospel of Thomas, refers to the experience of enlightenment, the moment when, after the initial anguish of discovery, a person perceives the grandeur of the knowledge they have acquired. This marvel is a feeling of deep connection with the universe and the divine, where all things become clear and interconnected. The interpretation of these passages can be especially difficult for those accustomed to the more straightforward approach of the canonical Gospels. However, it is this complexity that makes the Gospel of Thomas such a rich work. It does not offer ready-made answers, but invites the reader on a personal journey of reflection and self-discovery. The truth is not in the words themselves, but in what they reveal to each person individually. Another passage that challenges conventional interpretations is, "When you make the two one, you will become the Son of Man." This saying relates to the idea of unity, not only between the individual and the divine, but also within oneself. Speaking of two, becoming one, can be understood as the integration of our rational mind with our emotional heart, or of our human nature with our divine essence. These teachings force us to question the nature of reality and our existence. They challenge the traditional divisions between sacred and profane, body and soul, heaven and earth. And it is in this disturbance that the true transformative power of the Gospel of Thomas lies. It leads us to see beyond what we believe we know, and to seek a deeper understanding of our own existence. The fact that the Gospel of Thomas was excluded from the Bible is a subject of great curiosity for scholars and religious individuals. The biblical canon we know today was established over several centuries, and many texts that were part of early Christianity were left out. In the case of the Gospel of Thomas, some suggest that the main reason for its exclusion is that it presents a different Jesus from the one depicted in traditional Gospels. While the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John narrate the life of Jesus, his miracles, and his public sermons, the Gospel of Thomas focuses on secret and spiritual teachings. Jesus is not portrayed as much as the Savior who dies for the sins of humanity, but as a master of wisdom whose primary goal is to awaken the divinity within each person. This view of Jesus contrasts with the Orthodox Christianity that developed at the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, when the early church began consolidating its doctrines. The teachings of the Gospel of Thomas suggest that salvation is less about faith in Jesus as the Son of God, and more about discovering the spiritual power that resides within each of us. This type of teaching could have been seen as a threat to the church's power structure, which centralized salvation in established rituals and beliefs. Another reason for the exclusion of this gospel may lie in the fact that it is deeply Gnostic in its essence. Gnosticism was widely condemned by the early church for suggesting that spiritual knowledge, not just faith, was the path to salvation. The Gospel of Thomas challenges the notion that Christians need an intermediary, such as the church or sacraments, to access the divine. Instead, it teaches that the divine light is already within each individual. This focus on the individual's inner power and knowledge as a path to salvation may have been seen as dangerous by ecclesiastical leaders who wanted to maintain centralized control over doctrine and the faithful. Over the centuries, many other texts with similar teachings were also excluded or suppressed. However, with the rediscovery of Gnostic texts in the 20th century, we are beginning to gain a new understanding of these lost teachings. The Gospel of Thomas, in particular, offers a window into an early Christianity that valued self-knowledge and inner transformation as a path to enlightenment. Although it was excluded from the official Bible, it continues to challenge and inspire those who study it today. The exclusion of texts like the Gospel of Thomas is part of a larger process that occurred during the 4th century, when the Christian church underwent significant transformation. Before this period, Christianity was a relatively diverse faith, with various communities and traditions interpreting Jesus' teachings in different ways. There was an abundance of spiritual texts circulating among early Christians, many of which contained mystical and esoteric teachings that emphasized the direct connection of the individual with the divine. However, in 325 AD, with the Council of Nicaea, the Church began to consolidate its sacred texts and define what would be considered orthodox. During this period, many books that did not align with the official doctrine were excluded, and others were heavily edited to conform to the new guidelines. The goal was to create a unified faith that could be adopted across the Roman Empire, and for that, it was necessary to simplify and standardize beliefs. This standardization led to the loss of many mystical teachings that were once part of Christianity. The idea that each person possessed inner power and could attain salvation through spiritual knowledge was suppressed in favor of a more centralized doctrine, where salvation was mediated by the Church and its sacraments. Texts that taught about manifestation, consciousness, and unity were deemed heretical and banned. Among the texts that were edited or excluded are many that spoke of the power of emotion, inner faith, and the connection with the field or divine force. These teachings, which resonate with what we know today as the law of attraction, suggested that human beings had the power to shape their realities through the union of thought and emotion. However, with the editing of biblical texts in the 4th century, this wisdom was forgotten or deliberately concealed. The impact of this loss is still felt today. Much of the Western spiritual tradition was shaped by this edited version of the Bible, which excluded many of the teachings that emphasized inner power and unity with the divine. Only recently, with the rediscovery of manuscripts such as those from Nag Hammadi and the Dead Sea Scrolls, are we beginning to recover part of this ancient knowledge. For many, this recovery brings a new perspective on spirituality and Christianity. It makes us question what else may have been lost over the centuries and how these teachings might have changed the way we understand our relationship with the divine and the world around us. One of the most powerful ideas present in the Gospel of Thomas, as well as in other Gnostic texts, is the notion that divine consciousness permeates everything and everyone. There is no separation between the Creator and creation, between the divine and the human. In these texts, Jesus teaches that the kingdom of God is not in some distant place, but within each of us. This message can be deeply liberating, as it suggests that we do not need to seek the divine outside of ourselves. It is already present, waiting to be recognized. This teaching contrasts with the idea that spiritual power belongs exclusively to an external entity or a distant divine figure. Instead, Jesus teaches that every human being is part of this universal consciousness, and by truly knowing oneself, it is possible to access this inner power. In verse 3 of the Gospel of Thomas, he states, "When you know yourselves, then you will be known, and you will realize that you are the children of the living Father." This idea of oneness is central to Gnostic philosophy and echoes in many spiritual traditions around the world. The concept that we are all expressions of a single universal consciousness, manifested in different forms, is a truth that transcends religions and dogmas. This means that, in essence, we are not separated from God or from one another. Everything is interconnected. When we begin to understand this truth, the barriers that separate us from others and from the world around us begin to dissolve. We realize that the division between the sacred and the profane is illusory. Everything that exists, including ourselves, is an expression of the divine. And when we accept this, we start accessing the creative power that resides within us. This power, according to Jesus' teachings in the Gospel of Thomas, can literally shape our reality. When we understand that we are co-creators with the divine, we realize that our actions, thoughts, and emotions have a direct impact on the world around us. This leads to the understanding that the kingdom of heaven, as Jesus describes it, is not a physical place to be reached after death, but an inner reality that can be manifested here and now. Living from this consciousness of unity and inner power invites us to abandon fear and separation. When we understand that we are part of a single consciousness, we are able to live with more compassion, empathy, and love, both for ourselves and for others. It is a message that transcends time and invites us to awaken to a new way of being. One of the deepest messages in Gnostic texts, especially the Gospel of Thomas, is the importance of aligning thought and emotion for manifestation to occur. This principle, which we now call the law of attraction, is clearly expressed in several sayings of Jesus, which emphasize that true faith is not just an intellectual belief, but a deep emotional and spiritual state. In verse 106 of the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus teaches that when thought and emotion come together, something extraordinary happens. This teaching reflects the idea that it is not enough to merely want something superficially. It is necessary to feel, with one's whole being, that it is already a reality. This deep feeling is what generates manifestation. It is not just about wishing for something, but about believing and feeling that the desire has already been fulfilled. This concept of unifying thought and emotion is central to Gnostic spirituality. For Gnostics, the material world is an illusion, and the true reality lies in the spiritual realm. When someone manages to align their thoughts with their emotions, they are, in fact, transcending this illusion and accessing the creative power of the Spirit. That is why Jesus says that when the two become one, it is possible to move mountains, a symbol of the power of manifestation that resides in each of us. Many spiritual traditions, including Buddhism and Hinduism, also teach that the individual's inner state has a direct impact on the outer world. When we are at peace, aligned with our purpose, and connected to the divine within us, we attract experiences that reflect this state of harmony. The Gospel of Thomas reminds us that, in order to manifest what we desire, we must first harmonize internally. However, achieving this state of alignment is not easy. It requires practice and self-awareness. Often, we are prevented from manifesting what we desire because we are disconnected from our emotions or trapped by limiting beliefs. The Gospel of Thomas challenges us to look within and work through these issues so that we can align with the creative power that exists within us. This teaching, though ancient, continues to resonate with those seeking to understand the power of manifestation and inner spirituality. It reminds us that we are co-creators of our reality, and by uniting our thoughts and emotions, we can transform our lives and the world around us. Greg Braden is one of the modern scholars who interprets Jesus' teachings as a direct reference to what he calls the energy field, a universal force that connects everything in the universe. For Braden, Jesus was not just speaking in metaphors, but literally teaching us about the nature of this field and how we can connect to it through our emotions and thoughts. This field is what shapes our world, and how we interact with it determines what we manifest in our lives. According to this interpretation, the language this field understands is not words, but feelings. In his teachings, Jesus emphasized the importance of feeling the answer to prayer as if it had already been fulfilled. This idea is seen in the famous passage, "Ask and you shall receive," which, according to Braden, was edited over the centuries, removing the full understanding of how the request should be made. The original version, he argues, taught us to feel that the request had already been granted, without doubt or fear. This emphasis on emotion is fundamental to understanding how the energy field responds to our desires. When we think of something, we generate intention, but it is emotion that gives power to that intention. If our emotions are misaligned, for instance, if we desire something but simultaneously feel fear or doubt, the field will respond in a confused way, reflecting this internal conflict. This is why aligning the heart and mind is so crucial. Braden argues that this ancient knowledge was suppressed from Christian tradition over the centuries, particularly during the Bible's edits in the 4th century. However, he believes that the rediscovery of texts like the Gospel of Thomas can help us recover this forgotten power. These teachings show us that we have the ability to co-create our reality by consciously connecting to the energy field through the union of thought and emotion. This idea is not exclusive to Gnostic Christianity. Many spiritual traditions, including Taoism and Buddhism, emphasize the importance of emotional states and consciousness in shaping reality. In all of them, the heart and the emotions it generates is seen as the center of manifestation. For these traditions, the universe responds not to what we say, but to what we deeply feel. As more people become aware of this connection between emotion, thought, and reality, we are witnessing a resurgence of these ancient teachings in modern life. Even science is beginning to explore the relationship between the quantum field and human consciousness, suggesting that there is a scientific basis for these ancient spiritual teachings. What the Nag Hammadi texts reveal is that this wisdom has always been available. We just need to be willing to listen and feel.